Today, after 2 years stuck on the ground following fatal crashes, Boeing 737 MAX jet returns to the skies for its first commercial flight in the U.S. Plus, the Senate prepares to deliver President Trump the first overridden veto of his presidency. And finally, ski resorts try to balance their reduced capacity this year with a surging demand for winter sports. I'm MacKenzie Sigalos, and this is CNBC After Hours. The Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ all hit new record highs as soon as the market opened this morning. But they turned lower throughout the day, and all three major indices closed in negative territory. It's the first loss in 4 days for both the S&P and the Dow. And speaking of the Dow, the 30 stock index's worst performer of the year took center stage today. That would be Boeing. The aircraft maker is down more than 33% in 2020, with just 2 trading days left to go. Now, the past couple of years haven't gone well for Boeing. In March 2019, the company's 737 MAX jet was grounded around the world following 2 major crashes that killed more than 300 people. Today, nearly 2 years and a global pandemic later, the newly fixed and recertified plane completed its very first U.S. commercial flight. CNBC bought our transportation reporter Phil LeBeau a seat on that flight, and we caught up with him once he landed in New York City.
This was the first commercial service flight for the 737 MAX here in the United States. It was an American Airlines flight from Miami up to New York LaGuardia. It was about half full. There were some American executives as well as what we would call av geeks, people who are big fans of aviation and wanted to be on the first commercial flight of the MAX since it was ungrounded here in the United States. But there were also some paying customers, people who were coming from Miami to New York. They booked this flight. It happened to be the 737 MAX, and we had a chance to talk with some of those people, and we said to them, look, did you have any apprehensions about getting on this flight? Almost every person said the same thing. I thought about it a little bit as we were going down the runway, but it really wasn't a big deal. Once we took off, it was like any other flight. It was an uneventful flight, and that is certainly good news, not only for America, but also for Boeing, because the more that the MAX flies, and there are no issues, which they are not expecting, the more that the memory of the MAX being grounded and the 2 fatal crashes that killed 346 people, that will slowly start to fade from the minds of travelers. The feeling in the airline industry is that there will be some people who are apprehensive about getting on the MAX. In fact, recent surveys show that people who know about the accidents, about 37% of them say, yeah, I know about those accidents and I'm not real crazy about getting on the MAX. In fact, some people have said they're not going to fly the MAX at all. However, airline executives, as well as executives at Boeing, believe that eventually, as time goes on, people will become more accustomed to it. And it'll be just another plane that they're getting on to go from point A to point B. This flight and the beginning of commercial flights of the 737 MAX in the United States is huge news for Boeing. Why? Because as more airlines put the MAX back in service, it helps Boeing move past what's really been a terrible couple of years. Now, it'll take some time for them to rebuild the order book. They've lost more than 1,000 orders of the MAX in 2020. But within the last month, we've seen things start to turn a little bit. 98 MAXs have been ordered in the month of December. By far, the most in any single month since the plane was grounded in March of 2019. So they just need some stability here. The reason Boeing had so many orders for the MAX going into 2019 is because global travel was exploding. It was at a record high. Because of the pandemic, we've now seen airlines dial back how much they're flying and what they're doing with their fleets. However, many of the airlines that have ordered the MAX are sticking with their order. Why? Because this is a more cost-effective, more fuel-efficient plane. And in the airline business, it all comes down to cost. This is not the end of the 737 MAX saga for Boeing. It is an important part of turning the page, of moving forward and saying, okay, we've got it back in the air here in the United States. We'll start to see more airlines, not only here in the U.S., but around the world, flying this plane. Little by little, we're getting the MAX back to a point where it is growing in terms of orders and growing in terms of use.
Okay, let's get to our sound check. Here's a roundup of the day's biggest action and what the top newsmakers and business leaders had to say on CNBC's airwaves.
reason this is so important is Boeing has 450 Boeing Maxes sitting on the tarmac right now. Those aircraft valued at maybe $30 million apiece are taking a bunch of inventory on the balance sheet.
I think that the $600 is too small. That we need to be something closer to the $2,000. And the reason why, or a set of reasons why, is one, families that are at or below $70,000 in income who would get this full $600, this would only cover roughly 1 month of food, and maybe a little bit more than a month with regards to housing.
We're seeing something that's really transpired over the last 5-6 weeks, and the weekends in Las Vegas have been strong. It's the weekday business that's been pretty soft. I mean, it's the convention business and the business element that's been off Monday through Wednesday. But weekends have continued to get stronger every week that's gone by.
We're going to get through this difficult period right now over the next 4 weeks, 6 weeks, and I think as we enter spring, we're going to see cases come down really sharply, and we'll have a pretty quiet spring and summer. We'll have to put in place precautions heading into next fall. I don't think next fall and winter is going to be like what we've gone through, but we will have to be more mindful of the spread of this pathogen in the fall and the winter.
Just like people flock to national parks in the spring and summer after feeling cooped up at home during the first round of COVID lockdowns, some ski resorts are seeing double-digit growth in season pass interest as the outdoor pursuit adapts for winter. However, it may not be a windfall for these resorts, which have to limit their capacity on the mountain to enforce social distancing. CNBC's Contessa Brewer went to Hunter Mountain in New York State to report out this story.
Look, ski resorts are very concerned because the most important time of the spring for them, which is spring break, got disrupted by coronavirus lockdowns. They're trying to make up dollars and time. What we're seeing now is that on the heels of this massive nor'easter that brought 2 feet of fresh snow to mountains in the Northeast, normally there would be huge crowds lining up at the ski lifts to get on these mountains. Instead, the mountain resorts have to carefully manage these crowds to account for social distancing. And in many cases, what they've done is limit the lifts, limit the runs that are available, or they've even closed down their lodge facilities so that people can't get dressed inside the lodge. They can't leave their stuff inside a cubby. It's going to be a very different kind of experience for people who are very accustomed to skiing. On the other hand, what we're seeing is so much pent-up demand. People are sick and tired of being inside their houses and on Zoom calls. That cabin fever is sending them straight for the mountains. So if they can get a reservation, and a lot of resorts, especially the big ones, are demanding reservations this year to get on these ski lifts, if you can get a reservation, what you're likely to find is a very pleasant experience with a manageable crowd. The second thing is that people who have never skied before or who have left skiing and haven't done it much in the last few years might find an opportunity to renew their love for skiing. That could be so great for the ski industry. They think their cost for customer acquisition this year could be especially low. Jefferies analyst David Katz, who covers the only publicly traded ski resort company, Vail, told me that the way these ski resorts make their money is by packing people onto the mountains and on food and beverage inside the lodge. And both of those things are limited. They can't pack people onto these mountains because of those lift lines and because of social distancing requirements. In order to manage their costs, these ski resorts are going to downsize a little bit. David Katz told me that Vail Mountain right now has limited its runs to about 35% of the mountain. So what that means is that people who've bought season passes are more likely to experience the chairlifts and be able to get in line for those reservations. People who are buying day passes may find themselves out of luck. Vail Resorts reported earnings earlier this month. The business down 44% year over year. But here's something incredible. Demand for season passes up 20% year over year. The demand is up and they think it will continue to stay that way because everyone is looking for something to do.
Okay, time for today's numbers round. We'll start with $180 billion. Global video game revenue is on track to surge to nearly $180 billion this year, according to research firm IDC data. That's more money than the global movie and sports industries brought in this year combined. The COVID-19 lockdowns and social distancing measures have kept many people looking for in-home entertainment, therefore propelling video game revenues to spike 20% from last year. Next, 85. Apple shares hit an all-time high today, bringing its 2020 gain to roughly 85%. The iPhone maker is far and away the best performer in the Dow as well. The next best performer this year? Well, it's fellow tech giant Microsoft. That stock is up around 40% in 2020. And finally, $740 billion. The House of Representatives voted yesterday to override President Trump's veto of a colossal $740 billion defense spending bill. It was the first successful override to take place during Trump's presidency. Now, in order to actually pass the bill into law without Trump's signature, the Republican-controlled Senate has to agree with the House. Now, the legislation passed that chamber by large margins the first time before Trump struck it down. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says that he plans to hold a vote to override the veto tomorrow. You can follow that vote by going to CNBC.com and downloading the CNBC app. That's it for After Hours. We'll be back here in our home office tomorrow with our final show of 2020, so be sure to catch us then.